Shyness is a personality trait, Part 2. Basic and theoretical issues. Personality Psychology, Department of Psychology, California State University, Fresno, Professor Michael Botwin. Well, back to shyness. More than 80% of all individuals report some shyness during their lives. I think this cartoon really sums it up. You go to a situation and you think you're the only shy person there, but there are many others. Now, shyness can range from a minor discomfort to a chronic neuroses where you do not have the ability to behave normally in a situation. There are some developmental differences. Adolescent girls tend to be shyer than boys, and children tend to be more shy than adults. There are some consequences to shyness. One is loneliness, naturally, because you're not getting out and socializing and dealing with people. I've forgotten what the memory problems are. I'll get back to you on that one. And then there's problems with intimacy. Shy people feel sometimes a great deal of anxiety when they're around other people, and hence it's hard to get close to them. Now let me circle back to memory, because I was just teasing you on that one. Now, if you know anything about memory processes, you know one of the main things that messes up our ability to memorize things and remember things is anxiety. And shy people feeling anxiety in a situation oftentimes have trouble because the anxiety interferes with memory. Now again, let me tell you a story on me. My wife Vicky used to get, I should say, no longer gets, upset with me when we'd go out to a restaurant or something, and we'd come across some people I know from work. And they'd inevitably come up and say hi to me. And I, as Senate chair for 6 years, dealt with a lot of people across campus. Well, what happened is I'm really lousy at remembering names. So I'd have these long conversations with a person. And then my wife would get upset with me after that person left, and she'd say, "How come you didn't introduce me to them?" And I would say, "Well, I don't remember who I was talking to, babe." So I've gotten better, because a lot of times now I'll just say, "Oh, I can't catch your name," or I'll introduce my wife without introducing them, and then they'll introduce themselves back. So we've got some coping strategies for that one. But still, anxiety interferes with memory. Now, my office mate in graduate school, Lisa Melchior, was extremely interested in shyness, and she put together a group of shy behaviors. Let me just show you some of the top shy behaviors from her ACT report. Now, these are in the third person, and there were third person versions. There were also male and female versions. So let's look at these. Held my head down when someone was talking to me. Second one, I waited until someone else spoke first. Third, was scared to speak up for myself. Fourth, wouldn't dance in front of strangers. 5, worried that nobody liked me. 6, misinterpreted innocent statements as harmful. 7, would not ask for assistance in a store. And finally, hands turned cold and clammy around a member of the opposite sex. All of these were nominated by a group of people who were just told to think of things that shy people do and write them down. Now, after a series of analyses and prunings, these are the top 8 of the 60 or so acts in Dr. Melchior's list. So, behavioral manifestations of shyness. Physiological. You could turn red. I, being as pale as I am, when I used to get really, really embarrassed and shy, it doesn't happen as much nowadays, I would turn beet red. And I would turn so red that my face would feel hot. Embarrassment, usually from those kinds of things. And self-consciousness. Shy people are always aware of where they're at in the environment and what's going on. And these types of things show up when you see a shy person in an environment, or these are things you'll demonstrate when you're a shy person, possibly in an environment. Now, you can reduce all of those, and behavioral therapy does a great job of helping alleviate shy people from their symptoms. But I used to have my students laugh with me rather than at me. I still like them to do that. And so I remember at a certain point in class, if I said something very embarrassing, or if I was embarrassed and I turned bright red in class, I would in turn make some kind of joke. We kept a little thing up in the corner early in my teaching career that had SPT, which stood for Super Professor Tricks. And every time I fell over my feet, made a guffaw of some kind. Put a little notch up there. So you have to learn to work with this stuff. Now, this comes from a United Kingdom website. It talks about how shyness works in a feedback loop form. This is from a self-help site. It uses English jargon, not American, so hang in there with me. And let's look at how you would process through going to a mixer or a party. So it starts off with your beliefs. And remember, in our first discussion, we talked about different kind of behavioral manifestations of shyness, like bailing out at the last minute for things and things like that. So the shy person starts off, I'm not good at social situations, I'm poor at mixing with other people, so on, so on, so on. So, before the social situation, the person starting with that mindset. Then, on the way, negative thoughts that just kind of pop into someone's head. I'm not going to cope. I'm not going to have fun. I don't want to see so-and-so. Stuff like that. Thinking all of that stuff changes your physiological state. And you may get tense. You may get a dry throat. If I'm teaching face-to-face and occasionally on camera, I will consume something. And it's typically because, as a shy person, I am having a dry throat moment. And rather than have an embarrassing one, I just take a swig of my coffee. So finally, well, nope, not finally, I'm sorry, escape point. If you think enough bad thoughts about something, then you're going to say, I'm just not going to be able to deal with this party, and you bail. This forwards back and feeds back to your beginning point of strengthening your negative beliefs that you're not good at attending parties. So finally, you get to the party, you get to the social interaction, and you think everybody, and remember the egocentric nature of shyness. People are focusing on things. The shy person thinks, oh, I'm looking stupid, I'm sweating, I'm dressed right, I feel out of place, all of this kind of stuff. Well, naturally, the more you think about this stuff, the worse it's going to get. So the more you think about sweating, the more you're going to sweat, the more that you experienced anxiety, the more anxiety you're going to experience. So you engage in what these folks call safety behaviors. So you may avoid eye contact with people. You may sit in the corner. You might keep busy by going to the host or hostess and asking what you can do to help. Things like that. So finally, after the social event, you do the Monday morning quarterbacking. And you get things like negative thoughts. I look stupid. I didn't cope. I didn't do this right. Well, as you can see from the broken line, those will go feed back into your long-held beliefs about how you attend parties. So you can see it's a vicious feedback loop. And as we talked about during our very first lecture, when I showed you those behavioral manifestations of shyness, one of the things that you can do to break the cycle is to go out and have a positive interaction someplace and have a good experience at a social event. Well, let's look at some different ways that theorists look at shyness. This will be rather quick. We're not going to get into detailed fine-grained stuff here. From a psychoanalytic viewpoint, and I think this is a good insight, over-ego involvement. The person thinks that everyone is staring at them, everyone is paying attention to everything they do. Hence, that's anxiety-provoking if you think everybody's watching you all the time. So, too self-involvement in a situation. You place too much importance in a situation. Early in my days of dating, first round, I would ask a girl out. If she said no, I would take it very personally. I would figure there was something I did wrong. So as the shy person, I'd go dig a nice big hole, jump in it, cover with a rock, and beat myself up for a couple of weeks on what I didn't do correctly. Well, a big part of it was not asking a lot of girls out. I would wait for what I thought was a very special girl to ask out. And it would become such an inflated event to me that I probably botched a lot of them. Research on high-frequency daters, this is not the dating lecture, but it fits in, shows that high-frequency daters do one thing really, really well. They let rejection run off their back like a duck lets water off its back. They don't personalize the rejection. I had a friend in college who dated constantly beautiful women. And he always was dating multiple women at the same time. And he'd have new women cycle in and out of his life. And the new batch would always be far more attractive than the old batch. And as a 20-year-old guy who was losing at the dating game, I was looking at this kind of in awe. Well, in hindsight, it turns out what was going on was that he was just an extremely high-frequency dater, since he asked every woman that he thought was an acceptable date out. So he asked women out in the grocery store, the car wash, sitting in a restaurant, any place, anywhere. Whereas I would plan big occasions and usually fail pretty badly. So too much involvement in something is one way of looking at shyness. And this is where shy people get mislabeled as being arrogant because of this over self-involvement. Now our second perspective is a behavioral perspective. And I think if any area of psychology has done more to help those individuals that are extremely shy, it's the behaviorist. And two of the major ways that behaviorists see shy behaviors as due to two things. Now, there are others too. I'm just giving you the big two. Phobic reactions, you learn to be afraid of things. And you learn fears, usually because you've had rejection. Or non-adaptive learning. You just didn't learn the right way to interact socially. You find many behavioral programs on shyness having to do with teaching appropriate social skills. Now, our final perspective on shyness is the trait perspective. And research has shown that long-term shy people are low on sociability and high on fearfulness. Now, we've known this for quite a while. This comes to us from Jonathan Cheek, who is a professor now at Wesleyan University, and Arnold Buss, who is the father of the second author of your textbook, David Buss. And they've come up with what I think is the best scientific operational definition of shyness based on their work. Now, they say shyness is defined in terms of one's reactions to strangers and casual acquaintances. It's accompanied by feelings of awkwardness, discomfort, and the inhibition of normally expected social behavior. They find that fearfulness is the most related concept, the highest correlated concept to shyness. And it's related, but not the opposite of sociability. Now, in some more fine-grained analyses, Cheek and Buss have found that there's 3 different kinds of shyness. And I think these are extremely interesting. First of all, we have those shy, sociable people. These are people that are shy. They wish they weren't. They wish they could just get out there and interact like everybody else. But anxiety, fear, and other things hold them back. This is my kind of shyness. I wish I wasn't. There's also shy, unsociable people. These are people that are shy, but they really don't care about interacting with other people. They prefer their own company or the company of a very limited number of people. And then third, we have a differentiation between 2 kinds of shyness: public shyness versus private shyness. Now, you've probably all heard that public speaking is probably the biggest universal fear humans have. And that's basically public shyness. If we were doing this face-to-face, I'd pull out a piece of paper and I'd say, in front of the class, I'm going to call on 5 students who I've randomly chosen from my roster, and you're going to give me a 5-minute impromptu lecture on the material we've been covering in class. Well, you can imagine this, first of all, causes a great, massive amount of anxiety. And the closer I get to pretending to read the paper out loud and the names out loud, the more anxiety you can see. And then when the when the anxiety is at a crescendo, I spring it on them. I tell them I'm just pulling their chain. I'm just trying to elicit some public shyness. And it usually works like a charm. There are usually some students that are still, even after I tell them I'm not doing it, worried that I'm going to come back and do it. And it just works like a charm as an exercise because people generally don't like speaking in public. Now, I've told you I'm a shy person. I don't have the public shyness. I can speak in front of a group of 30 students. I've spoken in front of classes as big as 350. I've spoken to professional audiences of my peers in groups up to a couple hundred. I've spoken, when I was Senate Chair, to the trustees of the California State University system, and they have a very scary kind of meeting room. It kind of looks almost, scary the way it's set up. But I can do well in those situations. But I figure then each person is only part of my entire audience. Now, private shyness is just the opposite. You have trouble around a few people who you figure are intensely evaluating you. I have a little more of those. I just have kind of general shyness. So private shyness is where you have trouble talking to a couple people, one person, one-on-one. Because if you're being evaluated by a person one-on-one and they don't like you, that's 100% of your audience. And that's kind of intimidating and daunting. In fact, I have a friend and colleague who I will not mention by name, who is a brilliant lecturer. He gets people coming to his lectures just to hear him talk. They're not even enrolled in his classes. All of the aisles are full. People are sitting on the stairs. And he puts on a wonderful show. And a lot of students will be extremely inspired by his presentation. And they'll want to come up to him and talk one-on-one. Well, that's not going to happen because he has no public shyness, but a great deal of private shyness. So whereas he can talk to the 200 students in the auditorium, he can't talk without a great deal of discomfort to the couple of students in office hours. So that's our latest exploration into shyness. We'll see you next time in Personality Psychology. This has been a We Have Couches video production. Copyright 2020, Professor Michael Gottlieb. All rights reserved.